Silence falls across the earth as the sun rises, blood red on humanity's final day. In the ancient city of Jerusalem, a tall figure in flowing black robes materializes on the Temple Mount. Ordinary people cannot see him, but children point and animals cower. This is Azrael, the angel of death, sent by Allah to collect the final souls before judgment. For countless millennia he has served without question, but today something changes. As the veil between worlds thins, Azrael finds himself experiencing what he has only observed. Human emotion, for the first time since creation. Doubt enters his divine purpose. Can even death himself intervene in Allah's final decree? What will become of Azrael himself when time itself ceases to exist? The black scroll unfurled before Azrael, stretching infinitely yet contained within his grasp. Names, billions upon billions, written in elegant Arabic script, each representing a soul to be collected on this final day. He had carried this burden since the dawn of humanity, but never had he felt its weight until now. Azrael, my faithful servant. The voice of Allah surrounded him, not as sound but as pure truth, penetrating his very essence. The final day has come. You will collect every remaining soul before the sun sets. This is as it was always written. Azrael bowed his head, his wings folding respectfully behind him. I shall fulfill my purpose, creator of all things. He remembered his creation eons ago, before time itself had meaning. Formed as Malik al-Maut, the angel of death, his purpose singular and clear, to separate souls from bodies at their appointed hour. Unlike his brother angels, Jibril, who delivered messages, Mikael, who provided sustenance, Israfil, who would sound the trumpet, Azrael's duty had always been solemn and solitary. As he scanned the scroll, something unusual caught his attention. Among the endless black inscriptions, a single name shimmered in gold: Fatima Hassan. In all the millennia of his existence, he had never seen such an anomaly. What makes this soul different, he wondered, surprised to hear his own thoughts. Angels did not question, they obeyed. Rising above Jerusalem, Azrael expanded his awareness. His vision, unlike any mortal's, could perceive both physical and spiritual realms simultaneously. He watched souls flickering like candles across the globe, some bright with faith, others dim with despair, all awaiting his final visit. The sun continued its blood-red ascent. Signs foretold in scripture were manifesting. Strange animal behaviors, as creatures sensed the thinning veil, weather patterns disrupting worldwide, the subtle shift in the quality of light that only the most sensitive humans would notice. Azrael spread his vast wings, preparing to begin his final harvest. But the golden name pulled at his attention like gravity. Fatima Hassan. A mortal woman in Mecca, according to the scroll. Something about her was significant enough to be marked differently by Allah himself. In his right hand, Azrael held his silver dagger, the symbolic tool with which he would sever the connections between soul and body. In his left, the ever-present scroll. As he prepared to collect his first soul of this final day, he felt something entirely new ripple through his being. Hesitation in all the countless deaths he had overseen, from Adam's son Abel to yesterday's departed. He had never once hesitated. His was a divine purpose, carried out with perfect precision and detachment. Yet now questions formed. Why today of all days would he be experiencing these feelings? Was this part of Allah's plan as well? Or was it something else? Perhaps the thinning of reality as creation prepared for its transformation. Azrael closed his eyes, focusing on his duty. The scroll indicated an elderly man in Jerusalem was moments from death. He would begin there, as was proper, and perhaps understanding would come with the fulfillment of his purpose. Still, as he dissolved into shadows to reappear by the old man's bedside, one thought remained. Before the day was done, he would seek out Fatima Hassan and discover why, on the ledger of all humanity's remaining souls, ours alone shone like the desert sun. The veil between worlds was thinning, and for the first time in his existence, Azrael wondered if his role might be more than he had ever understood. The silver dagger in Azrael's hand gleamed with otherworldly light as he materialized beside Ibrahim Nazari's bed. The old man's breath came shallow and labored, his weathered face peaceful, despite the struggle happening within his failing body. For 93 years, Ibrahim had walked the earth, a teacher, a father, a faithful servant of Allah. Now his journey was ending. Azrael stood motionless, observing, usually invisible to mortal eyes. He was surprised when Ibrahim's roomy eyes opened and fixed directly on him. "I have been waiting for you," the old man whispered, his voice surprisingly strong. "You can see me?" Azrael's voice resonated like distant thunder, though no human ear could normally perceive it. Ibrahim nodded slightly. "The veil is thin today. I have prayed 5 times daily for 9 decades. I always knew we would meet." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Is it time?" Azrael approached, silver dagger raised. "It is time, Ibrahim Nazari." The old man closed his eyes. "Alhamdulillah. All praise belongs to Allah." As the dagger touched Ibrahim's chest, not piercing flesh but soul, something unexpected happened. Contact with the dying man's essence flooded Azrael with visions. Ibrahim as a boy, learning Qur'an at his father's knee, his wedding day, the birth of his children, decades of teaching mathematics to generations of students, the quiet joy of grandchildren, the profound peace of prayer. Azrael staggered backward, overwhelmed by the rush of human experience. In all his existence, he had collected souls without experiencing their lives. He had been a function, a purpose, not a participant. Yet now he felt Ibrahim's joys and sorrows as if they were his own. The soul separated gently from its earthly vessel, glowing with the light of a well-lived life. Ibrahim's soul looked upon its body with detachment, then turned to Azrael with recognition. "I am ready," the soul said, "no longer bound by physical limitations. You do not fear judgment?" Azrael asked, curious about this calm acceptance. "I have tried to live by the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. I have sought forgiveness for my sins. Whatever Allah decrees for me, I accept with gratitude." As Azrael guided the soul toward its temporary resting place, the barzakh, where souls would wait until the final trumpet, he felt a strange sensation. Was this respect? Admiration for the dignity with which Ibrahim faced eternity? Outside the window, birds took flight simultaneously, an unnatural synchronicity. The ground trembled slightly. Signs of the coming end were accelerating. Azrael departed, moving like shadow across continents. His next destination, Cairo, where disaster was unfolding. An earthquake had struck without warning, collapsing buildings and claiming hundreds of lives in an instant. Here, his work would be different. Not the gentle collection of a soul prepared for death, but the mass harvest of those taken by surprise. The chaos was absolute. Screams and dust filled the air as rescue workers dug frantically through rubble. Souls hovered in confusion above their broken bodies, some refusing to acknowledge their transition, others crying out in fear or anger. Azrael moved among them, silver dagger, working without pause. Each touch brought another flash of human experience: terror, disbelief, regret, acceptance. The spectrum of human reaction to unexpected death overwhelmed his newly awakening sensitivity. A young mother clung to the idea of her infant, still alive somewhere in the rubble. "I cannot go. My baby needs me," she cried as Azrael approached. "Your child will be cared for," he assured her, though he had never before offered comfort. "Your journey must continue." As the dagger touched her, he felt her desperate love and fear. The intensity of it caused his hand to tremble. Another soul, that of an elderly imam, recognized Azrael immediately. "Malek al-Maut," he said with reverence. "The hour is upon us, isn't it? This is not just my death, but the beginning of the end." "You see clearly," Azrael acknowledged. "Then I go gladly to await judgment." The imam's soul departed peacefully. Others were not so accepting. A wealthy businessman raged against his fate, trying to bargain, to flee, to deny what had happened. His soul's resistance made the separation painful, yet inevitable. Through each collection, Azrael's awareness expanded. Human emotions were not simple things, but complex webs of contradictions, fear and courage, despair and hope, selfishness and sacrifice, existing simultaneously within the same soul. As he completed his work in Cairo, a strange thought occurred to him. The golden name on his scroll, Fatima Hassan. What would her transition be like? Would she face death with Ibrahim's calm acceptance, or the businessman's desperate resistance? For the first time in his eternal existence, Azrael was curious. Istanbul's Haseki Sultan Hospital bustled with activity as doctors rushed between patients, their faces etched with confusion and concern. Unusual cases had been flooding in since dawn. Inexplicable seizures, sudden organ failures, children speaking in languages they'd never learned. The veil between worlds was thinning, and human bodies were responding to the proximity of the unseen. Azrael moved invisibly through the corridors, his black robes flowing without disturbing the air. The scroll had directed him to the children's ward where a name awaited collection. Yusuf Demachi, age 7. He found the boy in a private room, small and frail beneath white sheets. Leukemia had been consuming him for 3 years, his chart explained. Today would mark the end of his suffering. Beside the bed, a woman, his mother, knelt in fervent prayer, her forehead touching the floor, as she beseeched Allah for mercy. "Not today," she whispered between sobs. "Please, not on this day of all days. The news speaks of strange happenings. Let him see tomorrow." Azrael approached the bed, silver dagger in hand. This would be a simple collection, one of billions to be completed before sunset. Yet as he raised the dagger, the child's eyes opened. "Are you an angel?" Yusuf asked, his gaze fixed directly on Azrael. The angel of death froze. First Ibrahim, now this child. The thinning veil was making him increasingly visible to certain mortals. He had never before needed to interact with those he collected. "Yes," Azrael answered simply, his voice a gentle whisper in the boy's mind. "Do you have wings?" Yusuf asked, his curiosity undimmed by his condition. Azrael extended his massive shadowy wings, visible only to the child. Yusuf's eyes widened with wonder. "Are you here to take me to Jannah?" The boy's question held no fear, only innocent inquiry. "I am here to guide your soul to its next journey," Azrael replied, surprised by his own gentleness. The mother, unaware of the exchange, continued her desperate prayers. "Ya Allah, he is so young. If it is written that someone must go today, take me instead. Spare my son." Her words pierced Azrael with unexpected force. A mother's love, willing to trade her own existence for her child's. Such sacrifice was uniquely human, beyond angelic comprehension. Angels served without choice, without the option of self-sacrifice. Their obedience was their nature. Yusuf reached a thin hand toward Azrael's robe. "My mother is afraid for me. Can you tell her not to be afraid, that it doesn't hurt?" Azrael looked from the child to his praying mother. For the first time in his eternal existence, he hesitated not from confusion, but from compassion. This was not part of the divine plan, as he understood it. The name was written. The soul must be collected, and yet, will you collect everyone today? Yusuf asked, somehow sensing the magnitude of Azrael's purpose. "Yes, child, before sunset, even my mother." Azrael checked his scroll. The woman's name, Ayla de Mercy, was indeed listed, though not for immediate collection. Her time would come later in the day. Something stirred within Azrael's celestial form. an impossible sensation, a warmth that spread through his being. Distantly, he recognized it as the emotion humans called compassion. Without conscious decision, Azrael reached up and plucked a single feather from his wing. It gleamed golden in the hospital's fluorescent light, visible even to mortal eyes. As it detached, pain, another new sensation, flickered through him. The feather floated down, landing on Yusuf's chest. Where it touched, a warm glow spread through the boy's frail body. On Azrael's scroll, the name Yusuf Demirci simmered and faded, not disappearing completely, but becoming temporarily translucent. The boy gasped, color returning to his pale cheeks. His mother looked up, shocked by the sudden change in her. Though she couldn't see Azrael, her eyes widened at the golden feather that slowly dissolved into her son's chest. "A miracle," she whispered, reaching for her son's hand. "Allah has heard my prayers." Azrael backed away, unsettled by his own action. He had never before altered the course of death. The scroll was absolute, its names fixed by divine decree. Yet he had just postponed a collection granted a temporary stay. As he departed the hospital room, leaving mother and son embracing in tearful joy, Azrael examined his wing, where the golden feather had been removed. The empty space ached with an unfamiliar sensation. Had he just discovered that he, like humans, possessed a measure of free will? Or was this too part of Allah's plan, that on this final day, death himself would learn compassion? The implications were profound and troubling. If he could choose to spare one soul temporarily, what other choices might he make before the final sunset? The ancient city of Medina hummed with an unusual energy as Azrael materialized beside the modest home of Sheikh Abdullah al-Farsi. Inside, surrounded by towering bookshelves laden with religious texts, sat an elderly man with a snow-white beard. His weathered fingers traced lines in an ancient Qur'an, a 1,000-year-old manuscript that had survived crusades, colonization, and countless conflicts. Unlike other mortals, the sheikh paused as Azrael entered, though his aged eyes did not see the angel direct. "I feel your presence, Malak al-Maut," the old scholar said softly, his voice steady despite his awareness of death's proximity. "I have studied the signs my entire life. This is not merely my time, but the world's final day, is it not?" Azrael moved closer, intrigued. "You perceive much, Sheikh Abdullah." The Thela nodded, closing the ancient Qur'an with reverence. The red dawn, animals fleeing without cause, the inexplicable events reported worldwide, all foretold. He gestured to a shelf containing dozens of volumes he had authored on Islamic eschatology. "I have dedicated my existence to understanding the end times." Azrael observed the man's soul luminous with knowledge, humility, and faith. Few mortals had ever studied the divine plan with such devotion. "Will you permit me a final recitation before you fulfill your duty?" the sheikh asked. Azrael inclined his head in assent. Time was collapsing toward judgment, but this soul deserved respect. The sheikh opened the ancient Qur'an once more, finding a specific page with practiced ease. His voice, though carried the melodic cadence of one who had spent decades in recitation. "When the sun is wrapped up in darkness, and when the stars fall, disperse, and when the mountains are removed, and when the seas are filled with flame, and when the souls are paired, and when the girl buried alive is asked for what sin she was killed." As the sheikh continued through Surah at-Takwir, Azrael experienced an extraordinary phenomenon. The words describing the day of judgment resonated through his being, awakening memories of creation itself, when he had witnessed Allah bringing existence from nothingness, when the divine plan had first been revealed to the angels. The scholar's recitation continued, his voice strengthening with each verse. The ancient Qur'an began to emit a subtle light, visible even to mortal eyes. The words themselves seemed to hover above the page, their meaning deepening beyond mere language. Azrael recognized that he was witnessing something rare, a human who had achieved a profound understanding of divine wisdom through lifetime devotion. The sheikh's interpretation of sacred texts had uncovered layers of meaning that even some angels had not fully grasped. As the recitation concluded, the sheikh closed the book one final time. "I have questions, if I may be so bold." "Ask," Azrael replied, surprising himself with his willingness to engage. "Is there truly mercy within judgment? I have taught my students that Allah's compassion infuses even his final decree. Was I correct?" The question pierced Azrael deeply. He had always executed his duty without reflection, separating souls from bodies with perfect detachment. Yet today, he had spared the child Yusuf, acting from what could only be described as mercy. "There is mercy," Azrael acknowledged, though perhaps in forms beyond mortal understanding. The sheikh smiled. "And what of those who sought truth but followed different paths, those who never heard Islam's message but lived righteously?" Azrael considered. The scroll contained names of all faiths, and no faith. Judgment belongs to Allah alone. But I have observed that the quality of a soul reflects its actions more than its formal declaration. The sheikh nodded, satisfaction in his expression. "My colleagues often criticized my inclusive interpretations. It comforts me to hear this." The sheikh's breathing slowed. His time approached. He arranged himself to face Mecca, assuming the position for prayer one last time. "I am ready," he whispered. As Azrael raised the silver dagger, the sheikh began his final testimony of faith. "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." The dagger touched his heart, just as the final syllable left his lips. The connection was instantaneous. Azrael absorbed not just glimpses, but the sheikh's entire lifetime of religious scholarship, theological debates, spiritual insights, mystical experiences, and decades of contemplating the nature of existence flooded Azrael's consciousness. The sheikh's soul emerged, already oriented toward the divine presence, requiring no guidance. Yet before departing for the barzakh, it paused beside Azrael. "The golden feather you gave the child," the soul said. "That was not in the original decree, was it?" Azrael's surprise must have been evident, for the soul continued. "Even angels may discover their capacity for mercy. Perhaps that too is part of the divine plan for this final day." As the soul departed, Azrael remained beside the sheikh's body, contemplating this new understanding. Could it be that even he, the angel of death, was evolving as creation moved toward its culmination? The earth trembled beneath Tokyo's gleaming skyscrapers, sending glass and concrete raining onto streets already in chaos. Azrael moved through the destruction, collecting souls by the hundreds as buildings collapsed. The death toll mounted worldwide as natural disasters increased in frequency and intensity. Earthquakes in Japan, tsunamis crashing against coastal cities, volcanoes awakening from centuries of dormancy. From Tokyo to Rio de Janeiro, from New York to Sydney, Azrael traveled with the speed of thought, the silver dagger never resting. Each collection now brought not just flashes of memory, but profound emotional transfer. He experienced the terror of sudden death, the desperation of those trapped in rubble, calling for help that would never come, the peaceful surrender of the elderly who somehow sensed this was not just their end, but the world's. In the Himalayas, monks who had spent lifetimes in meditation looked skyward, perceiving shifts in reality, invisible to ordinary humans. In Vatican City, the Pope fell to his knees before an altar, overcome by visions he could not articulate. In Mecca, thousands gathered at the Kaaba, drawn by collective intuition that transcended ordinary faith. As Azrael passed over a small village in Indonesia, he heard it, distant yet unmistakable, the first note from Israfil's trumpet, not yet the blast that would resurrect the dead for judgment, but a preliminary tone, a warning that even now, Israfil was preparing to fulfill his purpose. The sound, though subtle, sent ripples through the fabric of reality. Humans could not consciously hear it, but animals everywhere reacted. Birds abandoned nesting sites, wolves howled in daylight, and domestic pets huddled in corners, refusing comfort. The veil between worlds continued to thin. In hospitals across the globe, those near death reported seeing shadowy wings. Children pointed at empty spaces, describing robed figures that adults could not perceive. The mentally ill suddenly spoke with clarity about coming judgment, their psychiatric symptoms replaced by an eerie lucidity. In Jerusalem, at the Western Wall, an Orthodox rabbi dropped his prayer book as a vision overwhelmed him. "The Malach Hamavet walks among us," he cried out, using the Hebrew name for the angel of death. "The end of days is upon us." Similar scenes unfolded in different faiths. A Buddhist monk in Thailand described Mara's approach. A Hindu priest in Varanasi spoke of Yama riding his buffalo through the mortal realm. A Yoruba priestess in Nigeria felt the presence of Ak, different names across cultures, all sensing the same truth. Death was active in the world as never before. Azrael paused atop Mount Everest, the one place momentarily quiet amid global chaos. He unfurled the black scroll, checking his progress. Billions of names remained, but he was collecting souls faster than ever before, his consciousness somehow expanding to manage multiple transitions simultaneously. He noticed patterns emerging in how souls responded to his presence. Those who had lived with faith, regardless of which faith, generally transitioned with greater ease. It was not the specific beliefs that seemed to matter, but rather the humble recognition that human understanding was limited, that something existed beyond the material world. Such souls required little guidance. They recognized their transition immediately. Those who had lived selfishly or cruelly often resisted, refusing to acknowledge their death, even as Azrael severed the connection between body and soul. Some tried to flee, though there was nowhere to escape to. Others raged against their fate or begged for more time. A few attempted to bargain, offering wealth or power that held no meaning beyond the mortal realm. Most fascinating to Azrael were those in between, ordinary humans who had lived neither exceptionally well nor badly. Their confusion often gave way to acceptance as understanding dawned. Many expressed regret, not for great sins but for small kindnesses withheld, for love unexpressed, for time wasted on trivialities. As Azrael prepared to resume his work, the distant tone of Israfil's trumpet sounded again, slightly louder. Though Israfil himself remained unseen, his presence was being felt throughout creation. Soon, very soon, the trumpet would sound in full, calling all souls to judgment. Azrael spread his wings, now aware of the empty space where he had plucked the golden feather for Yusuf. The action still troubled him. He had never before altered the course of death, yet something within him had changed. The experiences of the souls he had collected were affecting him, awakening something that felt almost human. The golden name on his scroll, Fatima Hassan, seemed to pulse with increasing urgency. Azrael knew he should continue his methodical harvesting of souls, working through the names as written. Yet the mystery of that unique golden inscription pulled at him. Perhaps he thought it was time to seek out this Fatima and discover why, among all humanity, her name alone shone with divine light. London's prestigious King's College Hospital descended into chaos as medical equipment failed inexplicably. Monitors displayed impossible readings, medications produced unpredictable effects, and patients reported visions that doctors attributed to mass hysteria. Among them, in a private room, Professor Richard Dawkins, renowned atheist philosopher, evolutionary biologist, and outspoken critic of religion, lay connected to life support. Azrael appeared silently beside the bed. According to the Black Scroll, Dawkins had mere minutes remaining. Stroke had damaged his brilliant mind, though his eyes remained alert, analyzing his surroundings with scientific detachment, even as his body failed. What Azrael did not expect was for those analytical eyes to fix directly upon him. "Fascinating," Dawkins whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're either a hallucination produced by my oxygen-deprived brain, or something else entirely." Azrael remained motionless. "You perceive me, winged figure, black robes, rather dramatic appearance. If my dying brain is going to hallucinate, I suppose it might as well be archetypal. Despite his condition, Dawkins' intellect remained sharp. "Are you the angel of death, then? Come to escort me to non-existence? I am Azrael," the angel confirmed. "I have come to separate your soul from your body." Dawkins attempted a weak smile. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I've spent my life arguing that there is no soul, only consciousness produced by the brain. When the brain dies, consciousness simply ceases." Azrael considered the man before him. Throughout human history, he had collected believers and non-believers alike, never engaging in debate about the reality he served. Yet today was different. Today the veil had thinned enough for direct perception. "You see me," Azrael observed, "yet you deny what I represent." The mind is quite capable of generating convincing illusions, especially in extremis. Dawkins' breathing grew more labored, "though I admit you're rather more detailed than I would have expected." Azrael reached into the folds of his robe and withdrew a gleaming object, the mirror of truth. Never before had he revealed this artifact to a living human, but something about this skeptic's unflinching rationality intrigued him. "Look," Azrael commanded, holding the mirror before Dawkins. The philosopher's eyes widened. In the mirror he saw not his physical reflection, but his soul, a complex, luminous energy composed of every thought, emotion, and experience of his lifetime. His scientific achievements glowed brightly, as did his genuine desire to free humanity from what he considered dangerous superstition. But there were also shadows, pride, occasional cruelty in debate, moments of doubt he had never acknowledged. "Impossible," Dawkins whispered, transfixed by the image. "This contradicts everything I've understood about consciousness." "Your understanding was incomplete," Azrael replied without judgment. "As is all human understanding. A neural misfire," Dawkins attempted to rationalize, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "Temporal lobe epilepsy could produce similar vision. Is that explanation more plausible than what you directly perceive?" For perhaps the first time in decades, the renowned skeptic found himself without a ready response. The silence between them stretched as Dawkins stared into the mirror of truth, watching his life's essence shimmer and pulse. "If, and I stress if, what I'm seeing is real," Dawkins finally said, "then I've been not entirely correct about the nature of consciousness." "Yes," Azrael agreed simply, "but that doesn't necessarily validate religious dogma," Dawkins continued, his analytical mind still functioning. "The existence of a soul doesn't prove a particular theology. Truth transcends human attempts to categorize it," Azrael responded. "Your questioning mind served a purpose. Doubt has value. Even angels have discovered this today." Dawkins' eyebrows rose slightly. "Angels experience doubt. This is a day of many firsts," Azrael acknowledged, thinking of the golden feather and the child he had spared. The machines monitoring Dawkins' vital signs began to alarm as his body approached its final moments. He looked from the mirror back to Azrael with a complex expression, part scientific curiosity, part apprehension, part wonder. "What happens next?" he asked. "Your soul transitions. Judgment comes later." Judgment. A flicker of the old defiance returned. "Based on adherence to religious rules?" "Based on the truth of your existence," Azrael corrected, gesturing to the mirror where the full measure of Dawkins' life was visible. "Not beliefs, but actions. Not words, but intent." As Azrael raised the silver dagger, Dawkins made no attempt to resist. Instead, he watched with the same curiosity that had driven his scientific career. How very interesting were his last words as the dagger touched him. The transition was unusual. As Dawkins' soul separated from his body, Azrael felt not just the man's memories, but his questioning nature, the relentless drive to understand, to test assumptions, to seek evidence. It was a mind that had dedicated itself to truth, as it understood truth to be. The soul, now free of physical constraints, looked at itself in wonder. "I was wrong about some things," it had acknowledged. but perhaps right about others. The universe remains more remarkable than I imagined. As Azrael guided the soul toward its temporary resting place, he reflected that doubt itself might serve divine purpose, that questioners like Dawkins might play their own role in the greater plan, challenging complacent certainty and demanding evidence where blind faith would suffice. The ancient city of Mecca was strangely calm compared to the chaos enveloping much of the world. As pilgrims circled the Kaaba in ever-growing numbers, drawn by intuition rather than scheduled Hajj, Azrael materialized atop Mount Arafat, overlooking the holy city. He unfurled the black scroll, his celestial vision focusing on the name that had intrigued him since dawn, Fatima Hassan. Unlike the billions of names written in black, hers alone gleamed golden. According to the scroll, she lived and worked in Mecca as a physician. Today, like all humans, her name would be crossed off the scroll. But why was hers marked differently? Azrael descended into the city, allowing himself to become fully invisible even to those who might normally perceive him. He would observe this woman before making himself known. He found her at Al-Noor Hospital, a modestly built woman in her 40s. Her hijab, practical beneath a white physician's coat. Dark circles beneath her eyes suggested exhaustion, yet she moved with purpose through emergency rooms, overflowing with patients affected by the day's unexplainable events. Dr. Hassan, the imam from Al-Haram Mosque, is seizing again, a nurse called urgently. Fatima rushed to the bedside of an elderly man whose body convulsed violently. With practiced movements, she stabilized him, speaking gentle reassurances though he could not hear them. This is the 5th religious leader admitted today with the same symptoms, Fatima told her colleague. All reported visions before collapsing. Perhaps they truly saw something, the nurse suggested. My grandmother woke speaking of angels walking among us. Fatima's expression revealed nothing, but Azrael, able to perceive her thoughts, detected the internal struggle. She was a woman of faith who also believed in science, and today, these worlds were colliding violently. As she moved from patient to patient, Azrael followed, watching as she treated physical ailments while grappling with their seemingly supernatural cause. Between cases, she stopped in the hospital's small prayer room, unrolling her prayer mat with practiced movements. Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim, she began, then hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly as she raised, Ya Allah, I have always believed in your wisdom, but today I struggle to understand. If this is the day of judgment as many claim, why must there be such suffering? Why must children cry in fear while the wicked continue unpunished? She paused, listening as if expecting an answer. When none came, she continued her prayers, but Azrael sensed the questions remained lodged in her heart. After prayers, Fatima washed her hands and returned to her rounds. In a private room, she tended to a young woman giving birth. Despite the apocalyptic conditions outside, new life continued to enter the world. The baby is breech, Fatima explained calmly to the frightened mother. We may need surgery. Will my baby live to see tomorrow? The woman asked, clutching Fatima's hand. People say the world is ending. Something remarkable happened then. Fatima's doubt seemed to vanish, replaced by compassionate certainty. Your child will live, she assured the mother. Whether for a day or decades, every moment is precious in Allah's sight. Now breathe with me while we turn this stubborn little one. Azrael watched as Fatima successfully delivered the infant without surgery, her skilled hands guided by both medical training and something deeper, a profound respect for life that transcended her questions about death. As evening approached, Fatima finally took a brief rest in the doctor's lounge. Alone, she removed a small, worn notebook from her pocket. Azrael moved closer, curious. Inside were 2 columns, one listing good deeds, the other listing failings. With unflinching honesty, Fatima recorded the day's events in both columns. Under good, delivered Amira's baby safely, comforted the dying imam, treated 17 patients in emergency. Under failings, lost patience with Nurse Karim, doubted Allah's mercy during prayers, failed to call my mother. Azrael recognized what he was witnessing. Each night, Fatima held herself accountable on the scales of deeds, not waiting for divine judgment but imposing it upon herself. When she finished writing, she closed her eyes in exhaustion. "I do not understand your plan," she whispered, "but I will continue serving as best I can until you call me home." In that moment, Azrael understood why her name appeared in gold. Unlike most humans who thought of divine judgment as a distant event, Fatima lived each day, conscious of being judged. She questioned, yes, but her questions did not prevent her from acting with mercy and purpose. She embodied the essential human paradox, doubt and faith coexisting, neither cancelling the other, but creating a deeper form of devotion, one that acknowledged mystery while continuing to serve. Azrael checked the black scroll again. Fatima's name remained golden, but unlike other names that would be collected at specific moments, hers seemed to pulse with undefined timing. It was as if her fate contained some element of choice or special circumstance. For the first time in his existence, Azrael was intensely curious about a specific human soul, not just for what it represented, but for what it might teach him about the divine plan he had executed without question for eons. As the blood-red sun reached its zenith, Azrael felt a summoning. Unlike the gentle pull of a soul needing collection, this was a commanding presence drawing him to a specific location. Without resistance, he allowed himself to be transported to the exact center of the earth. Not its geographical midpoint, but its spiritual axis, where physical and metaphysical realms intersected most intensely. Here, suspended in a void that existed between dimensions, floated the hourglass of existence. Taller than mountains yet contained within a thought, the cosmic timepiece measured not seconds or centuries, but the entire lifespan of creation. Its upper chamber had emptied precisely halfway. Each grain of crystallized time that fell marked the transition of countless souls from life to death, from temporal existence to eternal judgment. Azrael was not alone in this liminal space. 3 other presences materialized around the hourglass. His brother archangels, each summoned from their duties at this pivotal moment. Jabril, known to humans as Gabriel, the messenger, whose wings spanned galaxies, his form radiant with the light of revelation. Throughout history he had delivered divine guidance to prophets, his most sacred task being the transmission of the Qur'an to Muhammad. Michael to some, majestic and solemn, responsible for sustenance and nature, who directed rain to fall and crops to grow, according to divine decree. His expression was grave as he observed the half-empty hourglass. Israfil, keeper of the trumpet, whose instrument would soon sound the final call. Unlike the others, Israfil had been created solely for the end times, his purpose yet to be fully realized. His face was serene, anticipating the culmination of his existence. "Brothers," Jibril addressed them, his voice resonating through multiple dimensions. "Half the allotted time has passed. Let us each report on our assigned duties for this final day." Mikhail spoke first. "The natural order dissolves as decreed. Weather patterns have been unleashed beyond their boundaries. The seas rise, the earth trembles, fire erupts from forgotten depths. Creation returns to its elements in preparation for renewal." Israfil lifted his trumpet slightly. "I have sounded the preliminary notes, felt by creatures but not yet fully perceived by humans. The final call awaits your completion, Azrael, when all living souls have been harvested." The 3 turned to Azrael, expecting his report. He felt their collective gaze penetrating his being, sensing perhaps the changes within him. "The collection proceeds," Azrael stated. "Billions have already transitioned. The remaining souls will be gathered before sunset." Jibril studied him with piercing insight. "You have experienced something unexpected, brother. There is disturbance in your essence." Azrael considered concealing his thoughts, but realized the futility of hiding from beings who shared his celestial nature. I have discovered complexities in my task that I had not anticipated. Explain, Mikhail commanded. The thinning veil has allowed greater perception of human experience during collection. I find myself affected by these experiences. The three archangels exchanged glances of concern. Jibril moved closer to Azrael. You speak of emotions. Angels do not experience emotions as humans do. We feel divine love and holy fear, but not the chaotic spectrum of human feeling. Yet I have felt compassion, Azrael admitted, and curiosity, and doubt. At the word doubt, a tremor passed through the cosmic hourglass, causing several grains to fall simultaneously. Israfil's grip tightened on his trumpet. This is unprecedented, Mikhail stated, perhaps dangerous. Jibril's light dimmed slightly as he contemplated Azrael's admission. Has this development affected your execution of duty? Azrael considered the golden feather given to the child Yusuf, the extended conversation with the atheist Dawkins, his decision to observe Fatima rather than immediately collecting her soul. Small deviations, yet significant for one who had never before deviated. My duty continues, he answered carefully, though perhaps with greater awareness. Awareness is not required for obedience, Jibril reminded him. Your purpose was defined at creation, to separate souls from bodies at their appointed time. Nothing more. Yet today feels different, Azrael countered, as if additional purpose might be unfolding. Israfil, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. The plan is absolute. Each angel has their role. Mine is to sound the trumpet. Yours is to harvest souls. Deviations risk disruption to divine order. Or perhaps, Azrael suggested, what appears as deviation is itself part of the plan. The other archangels grew still at this suggestion. It bordered on presumption, yet could not be dismissed entirely. Jibril finally responded, remember, brother, that mercy already exists within Allah's plan. The compassion you believe you have discovered is merely a glimpse of what was already ordained. Do not mistake this glimpse for personal insight that supersedes your purpose. Azrael bowed his head in acknowledgement, though not necessarily agreement. The second half of the final day now begins, Mikhail declared, gesturing toward the hourglass. Let each return to their duty with perfect focus. As the archangels prepared to depart, Jibril approached Azrael once more. The golden name on your scroll, it troubles you. Azrael looked up sharply. You know of it? There are no secrets among us, brother. Fatima Hassan's name appears in gold by divine decree, for reasons you will understand when the time comes. Until then, continue your collections. All will be revealed at the appointed hour. With that cryptic statement, Jibril vanished in a flash of light, followed by Mikhail. Israfil lingered momentarily, his eyes on his trumpet. Soon, he said simply, then disappeared. Alone with the hourglass, Azrael watched another grain fall. Time was accelerating toward judgment, and his task remained unfinished. Yet Jibril's words about Fatima echoed in his thoughts, adding to the mystery rather than resolving it. What role would this questioning human doctor play in the final hours of existence? And why did her fate seem connected to his own unexpected awakening? The border region between two nations once called brothers now erupted in flames and fury. Artillery fire illuminated the afternoon sky as soldiers, young men who might have been friends in another life, took each other's lives with mechanical efficiency. This conflict, smoldering for decades, had escalated to unprecedented violence as the apocalyptic signs manifested worldwide. Azrael materialized at the heart of the battlefield, wings folded close to avoid the shells and bullets that passed harmlessly through his celestial form. The black scroll indicated dozens of imminent deaths here, souls that required collection within moments of each other. As he prepared to perform his duty, something unexpected materialized beside him, a gleaming weapon that hovered in the air, visible even to mortal eyes. The Sword of Consequence, an artifact that appeared only in places where human conflict reached its most profound expression of futility. The blade reflected not light, but truth, showing all who gazed upon it the ultimate outcome of their action. A young soldier stumbled into the clearing where the sword hovered, his rifle raised. Seeing the weapon floating before him, he froze in confusion. The sword of consequence turned slightly, its reflective surface capturing the soldier's image, not as he was now, but as he would be moments later when a sniper's bullet found his heart. The soldier gasped, understanding instantly what the vision meant. He turned, perhaps to flee, but the sniper's shot rang out. He collapsed as Azrael approached, silver dagger ready. "Am I dead?" the young man asks, seeing Azrael clearly in his final moments. "Yes," Azrael confirmed, touching the dagger to the soldier's chest. As the soul separated from its body, another soldier wearing the enemy's uniform burst into the clearing, only to be cut down by a mine hidden beneath his feet. His soul emerged confused and angry as Azrael collected it, with a second touch of the dagger. The two souls, now freed from physical form, hovered near each other. Recognition dawned in both as they perceived each other's true nature, beyond uniforms and ideologies. "Mahmud," the first soul asked, in disbelief. "From university." "Ubrahim," the second responded. "I thought you moved to the capital." "I did. Then the conscription came." The enemies had been classmates once, friends even, before borders and politics had redefined their relationship. Now, facing each other as souls rather than soldiers, the artificial divisions fell away. The sword of consequence rotated slowly, now reflecting scenes from across the battlefield. More deaths, more waste, more broken futures. Other souls began to gather as Azrael moved swiftly through the combat zone, collecting dozens in rapid succession. Former enemies clustered together, recognition and regret, passing between them as they acknowledged shared humanity too late. Discovered. An older commander's soul approached the gathering after Azrael collected him from beneath a collapsed bunker. "I gave the orders," he admitted, to the assembled souls of those who had died under his command, and those he had ordered killed. "I believed it was necessary." "As did I," responded the soul of his counterpart from the opposing forces, newly arrived and equally burdened. The sword of consequence turned once more, showing not just immediate outcomes, but generational impacts. Children orphaned, communities destroyed, hatred perpetuated through trauma and memory. Azrael observed the soul's reactions as they viewed these consequences together. Their responses were remarkably similar regardless of which side they had fought for. Sorrow, regret, and a profound realization of war's ultimate futility. Most striking to Azrael was how quickly former enemies began helping each other navigate their new reality. A soldier who had experienced death in previous conflicts explained the transition to frightened new arrivals from both armies. Enemies who had died trying to kill each other now comforted one another as they prepared for judgment. "Why could we not see this while alive?" asked a young medic who had died trying to save lives on the battlefield. "How could something as arbitrary as a border make us forget our common humanity?" The question was directed at Azrael, who found himself responding, "The veil between truth and illusion is thickest where fear and pride intersect. In life you see through that veil darkly, in death it dissolves." A commander's soul approached Azrael directly. "Will Ali forgive what we have done in the name of righteousness? We truly believed our cause was just." Azrael considered the question. Before today he would have simply directed the soul toward judgment without engagement. Now, he found himself responding with newfound insight. "Judgment belongs to Ali alone. But I have observed that true justice accounts for intention alongside action, for circumstances alongside choices. The merciful one sees with perfect clarity what you saw only partially." The sword of consequence began to fade as Azrael completed his work on the battlefield. The collected souls, no longer divided by the artificial boundaries of nation, religion, or ideology, moved together toward the barzakh, the waiting place between life and judgment. As Azrael prepared to depart for his next collection, he glanced back at the battlefield. The fighting continued unabated, new soldiers replacing the fallen, unaware that their enemies were once friends, neighbors, classmates, humans whose worth extended far beyond the uniforms they wore or the flags they served. The irony struck Azrael with unexpected force. Only in death did these souls recognize the truth that might have prevented their deaths, if realized earlier. Was this perhaps the greatest tragedy of human existence? That wisdom came too late. Sirens wailed across the maximum security prison as guards struggled to contain the escalating riot. The apocalyptic events unfolding worldwide had reached even these isolated walls: power failures, inexplicable equipment malfunctions, and a growing sense of doom that pushed already volatile inmates past their breaking point. Azrael passed through concrete and steel as if they were mist, his form imperceptible to the chaos of fighting prisoners and overwhelmed guards. The black scroll indicated multiple souls requiring collection here. Some guards, some prisoners, all fated to transition before the facility could be secured. In the medical wing, separated from the main riot, Azrael found his first subject. A man in his 60s lay handcuffed to a hospital bed. His breathing labored as a heart attack claimed his final moments. Unlike the peaceful transition of the faithful or the terrified confusion of the unprepared, this soul projected a distinctive energy, the burden of terrible deeds. Prisoner 3047-891, known decades earlier as Michael Sullivan, had earned 3 consecutive life sentences for crimes that had horrified the nation. A serial killer whose victims numbered in the dozens, he had eluded capture for years before a traffic violation led to his arrest. In prison, he had found religion, claiming redemption through faith, a conversion many dismissed as manipulation. As Azrael approached, Sullivan's eyes opened wide, fixing directly on the angel of death. "You've come for me," he whispered. No question in his voice. "I've been expecting you." Azrael stood silently, silver dagger in hand. This soul would be collected like any other, regardless of the life it had led. "Before you take me," Sullivan continued urgently, "I need to know, can someone like me be forgiven? Truly forgiven?" The question, so human in its desperation, gave Azrael pause. Throughout the day, he had been increasingly drawn into human concerns, experiencing emotions previously unknown to his angelic nature. Now, faced with this soul weighted by genuine atrocity, he found himself curious about the boundaries of divine mercy. "You have taken many lives," Azrael observed. Sullivan's eyes filled with tears. "I have, without mercy, without justification. Something was broken in me. I know that doesn't excuse what I did." His voice cracked. "For 23 years, in this place, I've remembered every face, every name. I've prayed for each soul I sent to you before their time." "Prayer without remorse is empty ritual," Azrael replied. "My remorse is the only thing I've owned in here," Sullivan countered, his chest heaving with emotion and physical pain. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need to know if it's possible, if Allah's mercy extends even to monsters like me." As the man's genuine anguish filled the space between them, something extraordinary materialized beside the bed, a simple iron key floating in midair, glowing with subtle light, the key of freedom, an artifact that appeared only when spiritual liberation became possible, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Sullivan stared at the key in wonder. "What is that?" "A sign," Azrael answered, understanding the artifact's significance. "True remorse has unlocked something within you." Sullivan's medical monitors began to alarm as his heart rhythm deteriorated. "I'm ready," he whispered. "Whatever judgment awaits me, I accept it. I only wish I could undo what I've done." Azrael touched the silver dagger to Sullivan's chest. As the soul separated from its physical form, the key of freedom moved closer. The transitioning soul reached for it instinctively, and upon contact the spiritual chains binding it, invisible until now, became briefly perceptible before dissolving. The weight of Sullivan's crimes remained part of his soul's essence, but the self-imposed prison of unresolvable guilt had been unlocked. This was not erasure of responsibility, but the possibility of eventual redemption, the first step in a long journey toward atonement. As Azrael guided this complex soul toward the barzakh, alarms intensified throughout the prison. In the main cell block, the riot had turned deadly. Guards and inmates alike lay dying from wounds inflicted in the chaos. Among them, prisoner Chun 513976, Raymond Cobb, a man whose violence had continued unabated behind bars, who had accumulated additional life sentences for killing fellow inmates, who boasted of his crimes and expressed only regret at not committing more. As Azrael collected his soul, Cobb exhibited none of Sullivan's remorse. Even facing the angel of death, he remained defiant, cursing as the dagger touched him. His soul emerged unchanged by the transition, angry, unrepentant, spiritually calcified by decades of embraced malevolence. No key of freedom appeared for this soul. The spiritual chains binding it remained intact, self-forged and self-maintained. The contrast between these two souls, both having committed terrible acts, yet responding to their own culpability so differently, illuminated something profound about justice and mercy that Azrael had never fully contemplated before. Justice without the possibility of redemption was mere punishment. Mercy without true remorse was meaningless. Leniency, the divine system he served, incorporated both principles perfectly, allowing each soul to participate in its own judgment through its response to its actions. Collecting the remaining souls from the prison riot, Azrael observed the spectrum between Sullivan and Cobb, some souls lightened by genuine remorse, others further burdened by defiance, most somewhere in between, confused and unprepared for judgment. As he prepared to depart the prison now secured by authorities, unaware that the most significant consequences of the riot lay beyond their perception, Azrael reflected that imprisonment existed in many forms. Bodies could be confined by walls, but souls could be imprisoned or liberated by their own choices, regardless of physical circumstances. Al-Noor Hospital had transformed into a battlefield of its own kind. The afternoon brought new waves of casualties, as Mecca experienced tremors that damaged ancient structures and modern buildings alike. Emergency generators struggled to power critical equipment as the city's infrastructure faltered under apocalyptic strain. Azrael returned to find Fatima Hassan working without rest, moving from patient to patient with focused determination. Though exhaustion shadowed her features, her hands remained steady, her decisions swift and sure. The golden name on his scroll continued to pulse with unusual brightness, still marked for collection, but at an unspecified time. A massive influx of injured pilgrims overwhelmed the emergency department as Azrael watched. Many had been at the Kaaba when a section of the Grand Mosque's wall collapsed. Fatima organized the chaos with remarkable efficiency, triaging patients according to survival probability. Crush injuries to Bay 3, she directed her team. Head traumas to Bay 1, anyone who can walk, direct to the courtyard for assessment. Azrael moved among the patients, invisible to most, collecting souls whose injuries proved fatal despite medical intervention. For each life Fatima fought to save, he waited patiently. Some she won back from the brink, others slipped beyond her reach into his care. An elderly pilgrim died despite her desperate efforts at resuscitation. As Azrael collected his soul with the silver dagger, Fatima stepped back, her expression reflecting professional composure, masking deeper frustration. "Another one I couldn't save," she murmured to herself. Then, surprising Azrael, she addressed the empty space where his invisible form stood. "I know you're here. I can feel your presence." Azrael remained still, uncertain if she truly perceived him or merely sensed death's proximity as many healthcare workers did. "Why?" she asked the seemingly empty air. "Why must there be such suffering? If this is the day of judgment as the imams are proclaiming, why not simply end it all at once? Why this prolonged agony for so many innocents?" The directness of her questioning, addressed to him without seeing him, compelled Azrael to respond, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Death is not punishment but transition," he said. "Suffering exists not by divine cruelty, but as consequence of physical existence. To his astonishment, Fatima tilted her head slightly, as if catching a whisper. "Is there purpose in this pain?" she asked the air. Before Azrael could respond, an emergency team rushed in with a new patient, a child pulled from collapsed housing. Fatima immediately refocused, her philosophical questioning set aside for the immediate need to preserve life. As she worked, something materialized beside her, a massive tome that hovered unseen by mortal eyes, except hers. She glanced at it briefly, startled, then returned to her patient. The Book of Lives had appeared, opening to pages that glowed with interconnected light. Azrael approached, recognizing this rare artifact that contained the complete story of every human existence, not just events, but their rippling consequences through time and eternity. The book had opened to show Fatima's own life story intersecting with countless others, including the patients she now treated. As she stabilized the injured child, Fatima's eyes darted occasionally to the floating book. The pages turned of their own accord, revealing how her medical interventions had altered not just individual lives, but entire family trajectories, communities, even nations through butterfly effects that stretched across generations. "I see," she whispered, comprehension dawning in her tired eyes. "We're all connected. Every life touches countless others." The book's pages continued turning, showing patients she had saved years earlier, whose descendants would contribute crucial innovations, acts of compassion, or necessary changes. It revealed how suffering often precipitated growth, how challenges fostered resilience, how even death could catalyze profound transformation for those who remained. When the child was stabilized and transferred to surgery, Fatima stood alone in the momentary quiet, staring at the Book of Lives with newfound understanding. "It's not random cruelty, is it?" she addressed Azrael directly, still unsure if anything was actually listening. "There's a pattern I can't fully comprehend." Azrael, moved by her perception, allowed himself to become partially visible, not his full angelic form, which might terrify, but a suggestion of presence, a condensation of shadow taking vague shape. Fatima's eyes widened, but she did not retreat. "You are real," she breathed. "Death itself has come to my hospital. I am Azrael," he confirmed, his voice gentle. "I have been collecting souls throughout this final day." "Final day," she repeated. "So it's true, judgment approaches." "Yes." Fatima straightened her shoulders, professional composure returning. "Then I have work to finish before my time comes. There are still lives to save, comfort to provide, even knowing the end approaches. Especially then." Her voice gained strength. "If these are their final hours, they should not suffer needlessly. Every moment of life has value right until its end." The Book of Lives shimmered in response to her words, its pages illuminating more brightly. Fatima's own timeline glowed with particular intensity, especially the hours ahead, hours yet unwritten. Azrael understood then, another facet of why her name appeared in gold. Most humans informed of impending judgment would focus on their own spiritual preparation. Fatima's instinct was to continue serving others until the very end. "Your name is written differently than others," Azrael told her. "There is purpose in your final hours that remains to be fulfilled." Fatima considered this, then nodded simply. "Then I should return to my patients." As new casualties arrived, and she hurried to meet them, the Book of Lives closed gently and faded from view. Azrael resumed his invisible observation, collecting souls as necessary, while watching Fatima work with renewed vigor. Her questions not eliminated, but transformed into purposeful action. In her he witnessed the quintessential human paradox: awareness of futility alongside commitment to meaning, recognition of death alongside affirmation of life's value, cosmic insignificance alongside profound individual purpose. The United Nations Emergency Council convened in New York as afternoon shadows lengthened across Manhattan. World leaders and representatives from every continent had gathered, some physically present, others appearing via secure video links that frequently glitched and distorted as global communications infrastructure struggled under the day's unprecedented strain. Azrael moved unseen among them, the black scroll indicating several names in this assembly marked for imminent collection. Unlike the chaotic hospital or violent battlefield, here death would come quietly to some who held immense power over millions. The Secretary General, her face drawn with exhaustion, addressed the gathered dignitaries. The global situation has deteriorated beyond our capacity for conventional response. Every continent reports the same phenomena: geological instability, electromagnetic disruptions, mass animal migrations, and widespread reports of unusual perceptions. She hesitated before continuing. Religious leaders worldwide are proclaiming apocalyptic scenarios consistent with their various faiths. While we maintain scientific objectivity, we cannot ignore that today's events align with numerous end-time prophecies across cultures. The clinical language could not mask the underlying message: the world was ending, and even those in highest authority stood powerless. As diplomats and presidents debated pointless emergency measures, Azrael observed not just their words, but their true motivations, visible to him as clearly as their physical forms. Some genuinely sought to protect their citizens in the crisis. Others calculated political advantages even now. A few simply feared for their personal legacies as history appeared to be concluding. Between two delegates from historically hostile nations, something materialized, a perfect sphere of crystal that hovered unseen by mortal eyes. The crystal sphere, an artifact that revealed all possible futures that could have been. Within its transparent depths, timelines branched and merged in endless variation. Azrael approached, drawn by the artifact's rare appearance. The crystal sphere responded to his proximity, its interior visions focusing on the two hostile delegates seated near it. It revealed an alternate reality where their nations had chosen cooperation instead of conflict. The prosperity that would have followed, the lives that would have been saved, the innovations that would have emerged from collaborative effort rather than competitive militarization. As Azrael watched, the Chinese president clutched suddenly at his chest, his face contorting in pain. Security personnel rushed forward as he collapsed. Medical staff attempted resuscitation, but Azrael already stood ready, silver dagger in hand. The man's name had just illuminated on the black scroll. The collection was swift and private amid the chaos. As the president's soul separated from his body, it oriented immediately toward Azrael, awareness dawning more quickly than in most transitions. "So it is true," the soul said, observing his own body being attended to below. The ancient texts were correct. Azrael inclined his head slightly. Many traditions contained elements of truth. The soul turned to the crystal sphere, now visible to his non-physical perception. Within it, he saw alternate versions of his life's decisions. Diplomatic initiatives abandoned for nationalist posturing, environmental protections sacrificed for economic growth, genuine peace opportunities missed for temporary political advantage. "I could have done so much more," the soul acknowledged, regret evident in its essence. "I was too concerned with historical perception, with appearing strong. Now history itself ends, and my legacy means nothing." "All human legacies conclude today," Azrael confirmed. "Only the soul's journey continues." Around them the summit had devolved into near panic as news of the Chinese president's collapse spread. The American president, watching her counterpart being carried out, seized the moment to address the assembly. "In this unprecedented global crisis, America stands ready to lead a coordinated response. Our military and scientific resources are unmatched." Her words halted abruptly as she too clutched her chest, stricken by the same swift cardiac arrest that had claimed her Chinese counterpart. Azrael moved toward her as confusion erupted again, the black scroll confirming her transition was due. As he collected her soul, it emerged indignant, still clinging to notions of exceptional status. "This cannot be happening to me," the soul protested. "Do you know who I am?" "You are a soul," Azrael replied simply. as are all humans beneath their temporary titles. The crystal sphere rotated toward this newly transitioning soul, revealing her alternate possibilities as it had for the Chinese president. Different choices that could have led to greater cooperation, reduced suffering, advanced human potential. Understanding slowly dawned as she observed the paths not taken. I was so certain of my rightness, the soul acknowledged, so convinced of American exceptionalism that I couldn't see we were all in this together. The two former rivals, powerful adversaries whose decisions had shaped global politics, hovered as souls stripped of office and nationality, their essential similarities now far more apparent than their differences. The remaining world leaders, shaken by the sudden death of two global powers' heads of state, fell into a somber silence that transcended political division. The German Chancellor rose slowly. Perhaps, she suggested quietly, in what may be our final hours, we should set aside national interests and simply ask, how can we best serve humanity in the time that remains? The Russian president, historically antagonistic toward Western powers, nodded in agreement. If this is indeed the end, let us meet it with dignity and cooperation. Azrael observed as lifelong enemies reached across ideological divides, making peace at the literal 11th hour. The crystal sphere pulsed with bittersweet illumination, showing how this same unity, achieved now only in extremity, could have transformed the world had it come earlier. As the summit continued with renewed purpose, Azrael departed with the souls of the fallen leaders. The crystal sphere faded behind him, its poignant visions of alternate futures no longer relevant as the final hours of the only remaining timeline ticked steadily toward conclusion. The afternoon shadows lengthened across Istanbul as Azrael returned to Haseki Sultan Hospital. The chaos had intensified, power now completely failed, staff working by emergency lighting, supplies dwindling as the city's infrastructure collapsed around them. The day's unprecedented events had overwhelmed all emergency systems, leaving hospitals isolated islands of increasingly desperate care. Azrael moved through crowded corridors until he reached the room where hours earlier he had spared young Yusuf with his golden feather. The boy still lived, his condition miraculously stabilized, but beside his bed Azrael found what had drawn him back. Ayla Demirci, the boy's mother, now lay unconscious on a hastily arranged cot, her breathing shallow, her life force ebbing. The black scroll illuminated her name, no longer with the distant timing of his morning visit, but with immediate urgency. Her time had come, despite her son's reprieve. As Azrael approached with the silver dagger, a shimmering garment materialized around his shoulders, the cloak of memories, an artifact that appeared rarely, allowing him to experience not just fragments, but the complete memory of a human life. The cloak settled around him, its fabric seeming to contain moving images from Ayla's existence, from birth to this final day. Without conscious decision, Azrael wrapped the cloak tightly around himself. Instantly, he was immersed in Ayla's life, with unprecedented completeness. Experiencing her childhood in a small Turkish village, the death of her parents in an earthquake, her determined pursuit of education despite poverty and discouragement, her marriage to a kind man who valued her intelligence, their joy at Yusuf's birth, and then the crushing diagnosis of his leukemia 3 years ago. Most powerfully, Azrael experienced her devotion to her son through his illness, the nights without sleep, the prayers that never ceased, the extra jobs she worked to afford treatments, the research she conducted, trying to find alternatives when conventional medicine failed, the countless moments of desperate hope followed by crushing disappointment, yet never surrendering to despair. Azrael witnessed how, just yesterday, doctors had told her Yusuf had perhaps a week remaining. He felt her anguish, her bargaining prayers, her determination to be strong for her son's final days. Then this morning, Azrael's golden feather, the miraculous improvement, her overwhelming gratitude to Allah for what she believed was divine intervention. The memories continued, her collapse just hours later, diagnosed with an aneurysm that had likely been developing for months, while she focused entirely on her son's needs, ignoring her own symptoms. Her last conscious thought, fear not for herself, but for Yusuf, who might survive only to be left alone. As Azrael emerged from the cloak's visions, he found Ayla's eyes open, fixed directly on him. Like others nearing death on this final day, the thinning veil allowed her to perceive him clearly. "You're the angel," she whispered. "The one who healed my son this morning." Azrael inclined his head slightly. "You've come for me now," she said. Not a question but a realization. Yes. Tears filled her eyes, but not from fear of death. Who will care for Yusuf? He's better, but still so fragile. He has no one else. The question penetrated Azrael deeply. Throughout the day, he had been increasingly moved by human concerns, experiencing their emotions, questioning aspects of his purpose. But this, a dying mother's worry for her child, affected him more profoundly than anything yet. "Your son's name was temporarily removed from my list," Azrael explained. "But without you, his future becomes uncertain again." Ayla reached toward her sleeping child in the adjacent bed, her fingers too weak to bridge the gap between them. "I would give anything, my soul, my chance at paradise, if it meant he could live a full life." The selflessness of her love resonated through Azrael's being. Since dawn, he had collected billions of souls, witnessed the full spectrum of human response to mortality. None had affected him like this woman's simple, absolute devotion. "I must collect your soul," Azrael said, raising the silver dagger. "It is written." "I understand," Ayla whispered. "But please, if angels can show mercy as you did this morning, watch over him after I'm gone. Guide someone to him who will love him as I have." As the dagger touched her heart and her soul began to separate from her body, Yusuf stirred in his bed. The boy's eyes opened, immediately fixing on Azrael's form. "You came back," Yusuf said, his voice stronger than during their morning encounter. "Yes," Azrael acknowledged, completing Ayla's soul transition with gentle precision. Ayla's soul emerged, immediately orienting toward her son. "He can see you too. Children perceive what adults cannot," Azrael explained, especially on this day as the veil thins. Yusuf looked from Azrael to the space where his mother's soul hovered, invisible to his living eyes. "Is Mama with you now?" The question held such innocent trust that Azrael found himself responding with unprecedented gentleness. "Yes, child." Her body could no longer contain her. Tears filled the boy's eyes, but he nodded with premature understanding. "Will you take her to heaven?" "Her journey continues beyond my purpose," Azrael explained, "but her love remains with you." Ayla's soul turned to Azrael with desperate hope. "Can he hear me?" "No, but he senses your presence." The boy reached toward the empty space where his mother's soul hovered. "I love you, Mama. Don't be afraid." These words, the same comfort she had always offered him, broke something open within Azrael. In all his existence, he had been the separator, the transition facilitator, never the comforter of those left behind. Yet now, seeing the child alone, knowing the mother's soul would soon depart for judgment, he found himself unwilling to simply leave as he had always done before. "I will stay until someone comes," Azrael told the boy, surprising himself with the offer. "You will not be alone." Ayla's soul brightened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, as Azrael prepared to guide her to the barzakh, where she would await judgment. "Perhaps this is why you spared him, so we could say goodbye." As her soul departed, Azrael remained beside Yusuf's bed, an angel of death transformed, however temporarily, into a guardian of the living. The afternoon call to prayer echoed across Medina, though today it carried unusual urgency. As the world descended further into chaos, thousands of Muslims had gathered at Al-Masjid an-Nabawi, the Prophet's mosque, seeking spiritual refuge in humanity's final hours. They crowded the marble courtyard surrounding the green dome that marked Muhammad's tomb, prostrating themselves in collective supplication. Azrael arrived silently, drawn by multiple names illuminating on his scroll. Despite the apocalyptic conditions outside, within these sacred walls prevailed an atmosphere not of panic, but of solemn acceptance. Elderly worshippers, those whose names now glowed on the black scroll, had come to die in this holiest of places, beside the resting place of the prophet they had honored throughout their lives. As Azrael moved among the faithful, something extraordinary manifested around the tomb's chamber, ancient words appearing in mid-air, glowing with inner light visible only to him and to the most spiritually attuned among the worshippers. The illuminated hadith, sacred sayings of Muhammad that revealed their deepest meanings when the veil between worlds grew thin. Whoever meets Allah without associating partners with him will enter paradise, glowed one hadith in Arabic script. Hovering over an elderly woman whose prayer beads moved steadily through trembling fingers despite earthquake tremors shaking the building's foundation. The world is sweet and green, and verily Allah is going to install you as successors upon it in order to see how you act, shimmered another, above a group of young men who had abandoned their university studies to come pray at the mosque when the signs began. Be in this world as if you were a stranger or a traveler, illuminated above the mosque's imam, whose powerful voice led the prayers without wavering, despite the knowledge that these might be the final prayers offered on earth. As Azrael prepared to collect the soul of an elderly pilgrim who had collapsed during prostration, he found himself reading the hadith that materialized above the man. Death is a gift to the believer. The saying glowed with particular intensity, drawing Azrael's attention to its layers of meaning. Throughout this momentous day, he had experienced human emotions for the first time. Doubt, compassion, curiosity. He had witnessed the full spectrum of human response to mortality. Now this simple hadith illuminated a perspective he had never fully appreciated, despite his eternal role, that for the faithful, his arrival represented not an ending, but a transition to something greater. The elderly man's soul emerged peacefully as the silver dagger touched him, immediately orienting toward Azrael with recognition and even gratitude. Alhamdulillah, the soul expressed. Praise belongs to Allah, who allowed me to complete my prayers in the Prophet's mosque before you came for me. Across the vast courtyard, more of the elderly faithful completed their final prostrations and transitions. One by one, Azrael collected them, each soul emerging with similar peaceful acceptance. Unlike the terror or resistance he often encountered, these souls welcomed him as if greeting an expected visitor whose arrival, while solemn, fulfilled a divine promise. As the souls gathered around him, waiting to be guided to the barzakh, Azrael noticed how the illuminated hadith continued to materialize, each saying revealing profound insights about death, judgment, and divine mercy that even he, created specifically to serve in the transition between life and afterlife, had never fully comprehended. The Prophet Muhammad's wisdom contained depths I had not recognized. Azrael acknowledged to the assembled souls, he was but a messenger, conveying what was revealed to him, responded the soul of a renowned Islamic scholar who had just transitioned. Even angels may discover new understanding in revelation. This statement, that he, an archangel, might learn from human prophetic tradition, would have seemed presumptuous to Azrael before today. Now, having experienced human emotion and perspective firsthand, he recognized its truth. The prophets had been given insights precisely because they understood human nature from within, combining divine revelation with lived experience in ways purely celestial beings could not. As earthquake tremors intensified and the mosque's magnificent structure began to show signs of stress, the imam led those still living in a final prayer. His voice carried powerful conviction as he recited from Surah Al-Qiyamah, the chapter of resurrection. When the sight is dazed and the moon is buried in darkness, and the sun and moon are joined together, that day will man say, where is the refuge? The illuminated hadith swirled more intensely around the tomb chamber as these Quranic verses were recited. Azrael, who had witnessed the revelation of these very words to Muhammad centuries ago, experienced them now with new depth. He recalled the Prophet's gentle teaching even in the face of disbelief. his mercy even toward enemies, his constant reminders that Allah's compassion exceeded his wrath. Throughout human history, Azrael had interacted with all the major prophets at their deaths. Moses with his unfinished journey, Jesus with his sacrificial love, Abraham with his unwavering faith. Each had offered humanity distinctive insights into divine nature. Muhammad's unique contribution, Azrael now recognized, was his practical wisdom that balanced spiritual aspiration with human limitation, divine judgment with merciful understanding. As the final tremors brought sections of the magnificent mosque crumbling down, Azrael collected the remaining souls marked on his scroll. The illuminated hadith began to fade as he prepared to depart with his solemn harvest. One final saying glowed momentarily above the green dome. Allah is not merciful to those who are not merciful to mankind. The words seemed directed specifically at Azrael, illuminating his day's journey of awakening compassion. Perhaps his role as the angel of death had always been meant to include mercy alongside judgment, a balance he had only begun to discover on this final day. The sun hung low in the western sky over Mecca, its blood-red hue deepening as the final hours of existence approached. The grand mosque lay partially collapsed from the day's escalating earthquakes, the Kaaba still standing amidst the rubble as if divinely protect. Thousands of pilgrims remained, praying among the ruins despite obvious danger, their faith transcending fear. Azrael returned to Al-Noor Hospital, now operating from a makeshift tent city in what had been its parking facility. The main building had been deemed structurally unsafe after the latest tremors. Inside the largest tent, Fatima Hassan worked tirelessly, her white coat stained with blood, her hijab askew from hours of relentless effort. The golden name on Azrael's scroll pulsed with unprecedented brightness. The time had come to understand its significance. Unlike his previous visits where he had remained invisible, Azrael now materialized fully before her wings extended, robes flowing, his celestial form undimmed. Patients and staff could not see him, but Fatima looked up immediately, her hands freezing in the middle of suturing a wound. "You," she whispered, recognizing the presence she had sensed throughout the day. "Fatima Hassan," Azrael acknowledged, his voice audible only to her. Without dropping her medical instruments, she straightened her back, facing him with remarkable composure. "You are the angel of death." "I am Azrael, yes." Around them, medical staff continued working, unaware of the extraordinary encounter unfolding in their midst. A nurse called Fatima's name, concerned by her sudden stillness, but her focus remained entirely on the angelic presence before her. "Have you come for me?" she asked directly. "Your name appears on my scroll," Azrael confirmed, unfurling the black scroll so she could see it, but differently than all others. Fatima's eyes widened as she saw her name written in gold among countless black inscriptions. "What does it mean?" "That is what I have come to understand." With deliberate movements, Fatima completed her suturing, tied off the thread, and addressed her colleague. "Please close for me. Dr. Karim. I need 5 minutes." She led Azrael to a quiet corner of the tent, where a single chair stood empty. Though exhausted, she remained standing, facing the angel of death with dignity. "I've felt your presence since morning," she said, watching me. "Why? Your name has intrigued me since dawn, the only one written in gold among billions, and now you've come to collect my soul." There was no fear in her question, only a physician's directness. "That appears to be my purpose, yet your name pulses differently than others. There seems to be choice involved." Fatima glanced back at the rows of injured patients. "Choice? What choice could there be on the day of judgment? We all meet our end today, do we not?" "Yes, but the manner of transition sometimes contains possibility." As they spoke, something extraordinary happened. A single tear formed in Azrael's eye, impossible for an angel who had never wept in all of existence. The tear fell, crystallizing before it reached the ground, transforming into a luminous gem that hovered between them. The tear of compassion, an artifact never before seen in all of creation. Angels did not weep, They executed divine will without emotional response. Yet Azrael's day of experiencing human perspective had transformed him in ways even he did not fully comprehend. Fatima stared at the crystallized tear, understanding instinctively its significance. "You've changed today, haven't you? Learned something from us humans before our end." "Yes," Azrael acknowledged. "I have experienced doubt, compassion, curiosity, emotions unknown to my kind. I have questioned aspects of my purpose while still fulfilling it. And now I find myself offering what I have never offered before." Azrael gestured to the hovering tear. "This contains a final mercy healing power beyond mortal medicine. You could use it to save those who would otherwise die in these final hours." Fatima reached toward the crystal tear but stopped short of touching it. "At what cost?" "Your immediate transition. If you choose this mercy for others, I collect your soul now, and if I refuse, you remain until the final trumpet, continuing your work with ordinary means, saving some but losing many. Your soul would be collected last of all humanity." Understanding dawned in Fatima's tired eyes. "That's why my name is in gold. I'm being offered a choice no one else has." "Yes, but why me? I'm no one special, just a doctor doing her duty." "Perhaps because you embody the essential human paradox that I have observed today. Doubt coexisting with faith, questioning alongside service. You have asked why suffering exists yet continue to alleviate it. You have questioned divine mercy while enacting it through your own hands." Fatima looked from the crystallized tear to the patients who filled the tent, many beyond her ability to save with conventional medicine. Then she glanced upward at the blood-red sky visible through the tent opening. "How much time remains before the end?" "Hours only. The final trumpet approaches." She nodded, decision forming in her expression. "If I take your tear, how many could be healed?" "Dozens, perhaps hundreds. Its power diminishes with use, but would far exceed your medical capabilities." Fatima straightened her shoulders, her exhaustion momentarily overcome by purpose. "Then my choice is clear. I will remain until the end, using your gift to save as many as possible before judgment comes for us all." She reached out, taking the tear of compassion into her palm, where it melted into her skin, suffusing her with subtle radiance. The effect was immediately visible. Her exhaustion lifted, her movements became more certain, her eyes clearer. "You understand," Azrael confirmed, "that you have chosen to be the final soul collected. You will witness much suffering, much fear, as the end approaches." "I'm a doctor," Fatima replied simply. "Witnessing suffering while trying to alleviate it is my calling. If Allah granted me this choice, there must be purpose in it." She turned back toward the patients, then paused, looking over her shoulder. "Will you stay? Watch what your tear accomplishes." "Yes," Azrael decided. "I will witness your final hours." Fatima nodded once, then returned to her patients, her hands now carrying healing power beyond medical science. As she touched the first critical patient, Azrael observed the immediate effect. Wounds closing, bleeding stopped, vital signs stabilizing with miraculous speed. For the first time in his eternal existence, Azrael would not just take life, but through this human vessel, participate in saving it, if only temporarily in these final hours, before all creation transformed. The evening sky transformed from blood red to deep crimson as the sun descended toward its final setting. Worldwide, the signs intensified beyond any possibility of scientific explanation. Oceans receded from shorelines as if pulled by impossible gravity. Mountains visibly shifted, their ancient foundations groaning. Aurora-like lights appeared even at the equator, casting eerie multicolored illumination across landscapes already transformed by disaster. Azrael continued his relentless harvesting of souls, the Black Scroll's names diminishing as humanity's numbers dwindled. Natural disasters had claimed millions, infrastructure collapse had taken millions more. The remainder huddled in whatever shelter remained, their electronic communications failing as power grids collapsed globally, leaving most to face the end without understanding its full nature. Then, with the sun hovering just above the horizon, it happened. In the sky above Jerusalem, visible simultaneously from every point on Earth, regardless of geographic impossibility, a massive angelic figure materialized, visible to all living humans regardless of spiritual sensitivity. Israfil, the trumpet angel, appeared with his instrument now physically manifest in his hands. The visible trumpet gleamed with otherworldly light, its impossible proportions dwarfing the tallest buildings below. Azrael paused in his collections, sensing the pivotal moment approaching. Throughout the day, Israfil's preliminary notes had been perceptible only to the spiritually attuned and to animals. Now the trumpet itself had become visible to all remaining humans, unmistakable evidence of divine intervention that transcended religious boundaries. Across the world, reactions varied dramatically. In surviving churches, synagogues, mosques and temples, the faithful fell to their knees in prayer, their various traditions suddenly secondary to the undeniable celestial reality before them. Many found validation of lifelong faith, even as they recognized that their specific doctrines had captured only portions of the greater truth, now revealing itself. Others responded with denial despite the evidence of their senses. Scientists in underground facilities attempted to explain the apparition as mass hallucination or atmospheric phenomena. Government officials in hardened bunkers drafted statements about foreign psychological operations. Some simply closed their eyes, refusing to acknowledge what hung impossibly in the sky. Most fascinating to Azrael were those in between, the uncertain, the questioning, those who had neither fully embraced nor rejected spiritual reality. Their responses showed remarkable adaptability. Many fell to their knees not in rehearsed prayer, but in spontaneous acknowledgement of something greater than themselves. Others reached out to loved ones, seeking human connection in their final hours, rather than theological certainty. Azrael moved to Mecca, where Fatima continued working in the makeshift hospital, the tear of compassion, empowering her hands with healing beyond medical science. She had saved dozens who would otherwise have perished, though she knew their reprieve was temporary given the approaching end. When Israfil appeared in the sky, Fatima paused briefly, looking upward through the tent opening like everyone around her. Unlike her colleagues who reacted with shock or religious fervor, she simply nodded once in acknowledgement, then returned to her patient. The trumpet angel, she explained calmly to a frightened child whose arm she was treating. He announces that our time is growing very short now, but don't be afraid, I'm still here with you. Her composure amidst cosmic revelation struck Azrael as quintessentially human, the capacity to acknowledge the transcendent while remaining grounded in immediate compassion. The golden name on his scroll pulsed with steady light, its unique status unchanged, despite the acceleration of events around them. Across the world, collected souls began to gather in great assemblies above major cities, visible occasionally to the living, when the thinning veil permitted glimpses beyond physical perception. Unlike their living counterparts still struggling with fear and confusion, these souls had already transitioned to understanding. They watched the unfolding events with the clarity that came from being partly disconnected from material existence. What happens next? Newly arrived souls as Azrael added them to the assemblies. For the first time in his existence, Azrael found himself explaining rather than simply directing. Israfil's trumpet will sound its final call. All remaining living will transition instantly. Then judgment begins. Will it be harsh? Asked the soul of a young woman who had died protecting her children from a collapsing building. Justice will be perfect, Azrael replied. But remember that divine justice incorporates mercy in ways beyond human understanding. As the collected souls conversed among themselves, sharing experiences and insights from their various faith traditions, Azrael realized something remarkable was occurring. The boundaries that had separated these souls in life, religious, cultural, national, dissolved in death. Christian souls engaged with Muslim souls about their shared prophets. Hindu souls discovered commonalities with Buddhist souls about the nature of attachment. Indigenous spiritual traditions found validation alongside formalized religion. What emerged was not homogenization, but harmonization. Each tradition containing elements of truth that complemented rather than contradicted others, like facets of a single gem reflecting light differently depending on perspective. Israfil raised the visible trumpet to his lips, preparing for the pentant note, the call that would signal the final phase before judgment. The sound, when it came, was both physical and metaphysical, a harmonic resonance that penetrated to the core of all remaining creation. Time itself began to slow, as reality prepared for transformation. The rotation of Earth decelerated, the sun's descent toward the horizon becoming almost imperceptible. Gravity wavered, causing objects to float momentarily before settling. The veil between physical and spiritual realms thinned to near transparency. In this suspended moment between existence as it had been and what would come next, Azrael returned once more to the makeshift hospital in Mecca, where Fatima Hassan continued working, her golden name the last one remaining on his scroll that had once contained all humanity. Time nearly stood still as Israfil raised the trumpet to his lips once more. The sun, blood-red and swollen, hung motionless at the horizon's edge. The cosmos itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the final note. In the makeshift hospital in Mecca, Fatima Hassan tended to her last patient, an elderly man whose eyes reflected calm acceptance despite his injuries. The healing power of Azrael's tear had diminished after helping countless sufferers, but enough remained to ease the man's pain. "There," she said, gently patting his hand. "Rest now." The man smiled peacefully. "The angel in the sky, it means the end has come, doesn't it?" "Yes," Fatima answered honestly, "but you won't face it alone." As the man closed his eyes in peaceful acceptance, Fatima straightened and turned to find Azrael standing before her, his form now fully visible, wings extended in their complete majesty. "It's time," he said simply. Fatima nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly as if a burden was being set down. "I've done what I could, more than most," Azrael acknowledged. "You've used my tear well." Around them, the few remaining medical staff moved as if through water, time's deceleration affecting all physical reality as the moment of transition approached. Fatima alone remained synchronized with Azrael's celestial time frame, her golden name pulsing on the black scroll that contained now only a single remaining inscription. "May I ask you something before the end?" Fatima requested. "Of course. Why was my name in gold? Of all humanity, why was I given this choice, this extra time?" Azrael considered the question that had intrigued him since dawn. "I believe now that you represented something essential about humanity that needed to be witnessed. What could I possibly represent? The capacity to hold contradiction without being destroyed by it, to question divine wisdom while continuing to serve divine purpose, to doubt while maintaining faith." Fatima smiled slightly. "That doesn't make me special. Many have struggled with the same paradox." "Yes, but you embodied it with particular clarity on this final day. Your doubt never paralyzed your compassion. Your questioning never prevented action." As they spoke, a massive book materialized between them, opening of its own accord. The Book of Completion, the final artifact, which could appear only when the last soul was ready for collection. Its pages turned on their own, revealing not just Fatima's life, but Azrael's journey throughout this momentous day. Each encounter was recorded: the peaceful passing of Ibrahim Nazari, the spared child Yusuf, the scholar Abdullah, the skeptical Dawkins, the repentant prisoner, the world leaders with their belated unity, the souls on the battlefield who found reconciliation in death. "You've changed today," Fatima observed, watching the record of Azrael's transformation unfold in the book's pages. "Yes, I've experienced human emotion, human doubt, human compassion. I've questioned aspects of my purpose while still fulfilling it. Then perhaps that's why my name was in gold, Fatima suggested. Not because I was special, but because you needed to complete your own transformation through our interaction. Perhaps I was meant to be the final soul so you could witness humanity fully before the end. The insight struck Azrael with the force of revelation. Throughout the day, he had assumed the gold inscription signified something unique about Fatima. Now he understood it might equally represent something essential about his own journey, the completion of an angelic education in human complexity. In the distance, visible through the tent's opening, Israfil's trumpet gleamed as he prepared to sound the final note. The moment of universal transition approached. "Are you afraid?" Azrael asked, genuinely curious about her final emotional state. "No," Fatima answered with simple honesty. "Concerned for those I love, yes. Sad that life with all its beauty must end, certainly, but not afraid." She looked up at him with sudden insight. "And what about you, angel of death? Are you afraid of what comes next when your purpose is fulfilled?" The question startled Azrael. In all his existence, he had never considered what would follow the completion of his divine assignment. Would he continue in some new capacity? Would his consciousness merge back into divine unity? Would the emotions and insights he had gained today persist beyond his completed purpose? "I don't know," he admitted, his first acknowledgement of fundamental uncertainty. Fatima nodded, understanding. "Then we face the unknown together." She extended her hand toward the silver dagger that would separate her soul from her body. "I'm ready now." As Azrael raised the dagger, he finally understood why this particular human had been chosen as the last. In her acceptance mixed with questioning, in her doubt coexisting with faith, in her intellectual honesty alongside spiritual openness, Fatima embodied humanity at its most essential, creatures of clay, reaching toward transcendence, never fully arriving yet never ceasing to strive. The dagger touched her heart just as Israfil sounded the trumpet's final note. Across the world, all remaining living humans transitioned instantly, their souls emerging together in the last great harvest, before judgment. Fatima's soul, the final one collected, emerged with unique clarity, immediately perceptive of both worlds. "It's beautiful," she whispered, seeing reality undimmed by physical limitation. The book of completion closed and began to glow with increasing brightness. Around them, the fabric of reality itself began to transform as creation moved toward its next phase. Azrael, his scroll now complete with every name crossed off, witnessed the beginning of judgment, not as the harsh tribunal many had feared, but as the perfectly balanced assessment of souls who judged themselves more accurately than any external authority could impose. In this moment between existence as it had been and what would come next, Azrael realized that mercy had been woven into the divine plan from the beginning, not as exception to justice, but as its fulfillment.